My name is Riley, 33 years old, and I am currently a financial attorney in Chicago. I spent my entire youth climbing each rung of the career ladder, trying to become the steady pillar my family could lean on after my parents' chaotic divorce. But nothing could have prepared me for the shock I received that morning. Just a few minutes before the most important presentation of the month, I got a long message from my younger sister, Savannah. In it, she announced that she had quit her job to find herself and demanded that I cover all her living expenses for 1 full year, including rent, car payments, food, and even a meditation retreat in California. Before I could even react, the last line of the message made me freeze. I already put your name on a $150,000 loan. The bank just needs your signature to finalize it. I had never agreed to it, never even knew such a loan existed. The feeling of betrayal, of being used, of being cornered like prey, crushed the air out of me right there in a crowded office. Have you ever been pushed into a trap by the very person you trusted most? What would you do if you discovered your own sister had used your name to borrow an enormous sum of money? If you've ever gone through something like this, share your thoughts with me in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to follow the intense and painful story behind one life-altering decision. I will never stay silent again. I don't clearly remember when everything began to drift off course, only that I grew up feeling I had to be tougher than my age, that I had to hold it all together while the adults in the house were still stumbling through their own pain. I was the oldest. Savannah was 5 years younger, the little sister with a smile like June sunshine, and the one my mother cradled as if she were made of glass. My parents divorced when I had just started high school. The day my father left, I was clearing the dinner table. No tears, no shouting, just 2 suitcases and one cold glance tossed at my mother. From that day on, the atmosphere in the house shifted. My mother, Linda, turned into a woman constantly weighed down by guilt. Every time Savannah cried, whether over a lost doll or a disappointing test grade, Mom rushed to comfort her, as if soothing Savannah could erase the cracks in her own heart. I never blamed her, but I remember sitting in the living room clutching my ninth-grade math homework, quietly watching through the half-open bedroom door as the two of them clung to each other. No one asked how I felt that day. People often said I was independent early, but the truth was, I had no choice. When Mom told me the family budget couldn't stretch far enough for both of us to go to private school, she looked straight at me and said, "You'll do fine anywhere, Riley. Be strong, okay?" So I went to public school. I started tutoring neighborhood kids to buy my own books. On weekends, I cleaned the house while Savannah went to dance lessons, art classes, later yoga, pottery, even acting workshops. Whatever she wanted, Mom found a way. I once tried to protest. One year, when I was accepted into my school's honors program, I brought home the congratulatory letter. Mom smiled, patted my shoulder, but her eyes stayed glued to Savannah's tuition bill. Then she sighed and said, "Push yourself a little more, honey. I know you can handle it." And I did handle it. I left for school early, worked at a bakery after class, studied late into the night. I cut my hair short to save on shampoo. I never asked for money to go to the movies with friends, knowing that money would go toward Savannah's classes. While my friends posted summer vacation photos, I was filling out scholarship applications and bussing tables at a coffee shop. As for Savannah, she never had to worry about money. She upgraded her phone every year, swiped Mom's credit card without a second thought. I still remember when she lost a designer handbag in a mall restroom. Mom didn't scold her, just sighed, and a few weeks later a new bag appeared. Some might say my mother was playing favorites. I think it came from her obsession with compensating for a broken marriage. She believed she had to coddle the fragile child. As for me, in her eyes, I was the one who would always be fine. But being fine doesn't mean not needing love in the right way. I used to wish Mom would look at me the way she looked at Savannah, with softness, with care, with a simple question like, "Are you tired?" But the older I got, the more I realized that people can love you in their own way and still wound you deeply without meaning to. When I earned a full scholarship to college, I bought myself a new backpack with my savings. No one came to see me off at the bus station the day I left home. Mom was busy taking Savannah to her orientation at private school. I didn't get angry, I just remembered. Those years forged me into steel. I learned not to expect anyone to catch me when I fell. I became a financial lawyer not because I loved numbers, but because I wanted to control what my mother never could. I didn't want anyone in my family to be lost again because of ignorance about money. Yet, no matter how successful I became, I was still the strong one in Mom's eyes. And Savannah? She was still finding herself. Only now, her quest had dragged me into a spiral I never wanted to touch. Her message that morning wasn't a request, it was a declaration, a statement that I would carry the load again, not just emotionally, but financially. I had stayed silent through childhood and young adulthood, thinking I was the one who could endure. But that morning, standing in a cold office with my phone clutched tight, I knew if I didn't stop it, none of us would ever truly grow up. You're listed on a $150,000 loan. No permission, no question, no hesitation. Did Mom know? Did she help? Or did she, like always, assume your sister will handle it? It wasn't anger I felt. It was an icy chill running down my spine, as if every boundary I had tried to build all these years was just a rotting wooden fence before a storm. I knew it was time to say no. Not just with words, but with action. Not just because I was exhausted, but because if I didn't stop, Savannah would never learn to stand on her own 2 feet. I left home at 18 with nothing but a suitcase, an old backpack, and a full scholarship to Northwestern's law school. In those first dorm years, I got used to the sound of late-night traffic, breakfasts of stale bread and instant coffee, and all-nighters poring over statutes and case law. I didn't have time to romanticize college life, let alone money to burn on trends. While friends threw birthday parties or went on spring break trips, I worked as a teaching assistant or took unpaid internships at small suburban law offices. Each experience, harsh or dry, was a brick I laid by hand on my own path. When others were confused about their majors, I already knew I would pursue financial law. Not because it glittered, but because I wanted mastery over the very system that once left my mother so helpless. I graduated with near-perfect grades and landed at a major Chicago firm. At first, I was just an assistant, but within 3 years, I was handling major accounts myself, sitting across from corporate clients. I never called Mom to brag about promotions. I knew she was busy with Savannah. Savannah never once worried about dinner money. While I stayed late revising contracts, she posted vacation photos from Sedona, sipping wine on rooftops in Austin. Every time I scrolled past her pictures while checking my messages, I felt a mix I couldn't name: distant, familiar, helpless. Mom would say, "She's young, Riley. Let her live a little. Not everyone finds passion in textbooks like you." Savannah attended a private university in California. I can't even recall which major stuck since she changed at least 3 times. First communications, then interior design, then event management. Before finishing her 4th semester, she dropped out, claiming she didn't connect with the curriculum. I asked Mom, "That semester cost more than $20,000. Are you making her pay it back?" She gave me that weary look. "She's exhausted, honey. She doesn't need more pressure. I can handle it, don't worry." I wasn't emotionless. I just learned to swallow it. I even tried to bond with Savannah, invited her out, asked what she liked, but it always ended with her snapping. "You ask questions like an interrogation. Can't you just relax?" I didn't argue, I just stepped back. Everyone lives their own way, but I never imagined her way of living would demand that I foot the bill. One year, on Mom's birthday, I came home earlier than expected and overheard them in the kitchen. Mom chuckled, "Your sister's brilliant. Don't worry, she'll succeed. As for you, I just want you happy," Savannah whispered. I could never live like her. Cold and boring. It wasn't the insult that stung. It was the truth in her words. I had become the opposite of what Mom called feeling, freedom, or truly living. I was the provider, the fixer, the one who didn't need anything. The price of stability, I realized, was isolation. When I finally bought my first condo after 7 years of work, I invited Mom and Savannah over. I cooked myself, set the table. Savannah looked around and laughed. "Wow, like a showroom apartment, nothing personal. Don't you feel suffocated living like this?" I didn't answer. I poured the wine and swallowed the question in my throat. "And how do you live, never paying the cost of it?" Mom, as always, smoothed it over. "She didn't mean it, Riley. Your sister just says things without thinking." My whole life, Mom had never defended me from a single remark. But with Savannah, there was always an excuse. Maybe I was at fault too. I never voiced what I needed. I assumed success was the only way to earn respect. I thought being decent, working hard, and not bothering anyone was enough. I was wrong. In Mom's eyes, I was the one who didn't need care. In Savannah's, I was a walking ATM. So when that message came, I wasn't even shocked. I just felt it all finally hit the breaking point, not because she asked for money, but because she believed she had the right to expect it. She thought I was nothing more than the family bank account, always open for withdrawal whenever she needed to find herself. That wasn't just thoughtlessness, that was contempt. And as someone who had tried to protect everyone, I could not let that contempt become our family's new normal. I stared at the phone, heart pounding out of my chest. Savannah's words glared back at me, clean, deliberate, unapologetic. Each line pressed against my lungs until I could hardly breathe under the fluorescent lights of the law office I had given nearly a decade of my life to. "I quit my job. I need time to explore myself and find meaning. In the meantime, you'll cover my rent, car, living expenses, and a retreat in Sedona. I already filed a $150,000 loan. Just sign it. I put your name as guarantor, because I know you always support me. No permission, no question, just a notice. Neat, clear, heartless." My temples throbbed, not because of the money, but because of the entitlement, because of the boundary she trampled, because the trust she had taken for granted all these years was shattered in a single loan document I never knew had my name on it. I opened the message again, hoping I had misread it. But the numbers were still there, sharp and undeniable. $150,000. In the loan documents, I was listed as the primary guarantor. If Savannah didn't pay, I would be the one carrying the debt. And her plan? To spend the next year resting, healing her soul, as if that were a privilege everyone could claim whenever they felt tired. My phone buzzed nonstop. Another message. She wrote, "Don't worry too much. I'll pay you back once I open my own studio. You just need to trust me. You always have money. I just need you to help me start." I got up, walked straight out of the conference room into the women's restroom, and locked the door. I leaned back against the wall, eyes shut tight. My heart was heavy, not only because of the numbers, but because I felt betrayed by the person closest to me. I tried to remember, when was the last time she asked me, "Are you okay?" Never. Savannah only called when she needed something, when she was broke, when she fought with her boyfriend, when she got rejected from a job. But the times I was exhausted, the times I longed for someone to ask if I needed a break, those times I stayed silent because I thought I was the only one not allowed to be weak. I dialed Savannah's number. She didn't pick up. I tried again. Still no answer. Minutes later, another text arrived. I'm in yoga class. Call me later. A dry laugh escaped my lips. While I wrestled with the decision of whether to report her for forgery, she was in a relaxation class, living her so-called mission of freeing herself from the old system. I opened my email, checking the bank notification. Attached was the loan application form, guarantor, Riley M. Thompson, signed in smooth ink that looked real. I zoomed in, comparing each stroke with an old contract of mine. The signature wasn't mine, but it was close enough to fool a bank officer who didn't look carefully. I called the bank's legal department immediately. A middle-aged woman answered. I gave my name, my profession, and explained the situation. She paused for a moment, then carefully replied, "We'll escalate this to internal verification. However, if the application hasn't been approved yet, you have the right to file a disclaimer of liability." I nodded, as if she could see me. I left the restroom and returned to my desk. No one knew what I had just gone through. I opened my laptop and began drafting a formal objection to the guarantor contract. My hands trembled, but each word came out cold, clear, decisive. When things were temporarily under control, I called my mother. Linda answered after the first ring. "Riley? Perfect timing. I was just about to call you." I bit my lip, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Mom, did you know Savannah used my name as guarantor on a $150,000 loan?" There was silence on the other end. I heard a chair scrape, the clink of a spoon against glass. "Well, I heard her mention she was preparing a business plan." "Not a plan, Mom, a loan application, a forged signature. Did you know she put my name on it?" Linda sighed. "She's just trying to start over. She feels lost. You're in a better position. A little help isn't too much to ask." I gripped the phone tighter. My voice could no longer stay gentle. "Mom, this isn't help. This is illegal. And you're justifying it. I can't keep being her emergency wallet, especially when you enable it." "I'm not enabling," she snapped, her tone sharp. I don't want to see her suffer. She's not like you. She's not strong enough to handle life alone." A laugh burst out of me, weary and hollow. "And because you keep thinking she's weak, she'll never learn to be strong." Linda fell silent. I didn't speak further. I didn't want another argument. I just wanted this cycle to end, at any cost. I hung up, feeling hollow. Something inside me cracked quietly, not just because of the loan, but because of the truth. The people I loved most believed they could use affection to excuse every wrong, leaving me to clean up the aftermath. Not this time. Not anymore. I never thought a single message could become an earthquake that shook the foundations of a family. But it did. And when I politely, clearly, without apology, refused to shoulder yet another debt for my sister, every familiar door seemed to slam shut at once. My mother was the first to lash out. She called me back that evening, her voice stripped of its usual soothing tone, cold and relentless like hail hammering against glass. "You've disappointed me, Riley. Family is supposed to help each other. You're living comfortably while she's in crisis. How can you turn your back like this?" I stayed silent because anything I said would only add fuel to the fire raging on her end of the line. But when she ended with, "You're selfish," the words cut deeper than she could ever know. Selfish? The one who stayed up 3 nights editing scholarship essays for Savannah. The one who pulled $4,000 from her own savings when she lost aid because of poor grades. The one who canceled a work trip to Seattle just to fly home to Chicago when Mom said she was in a terrible state, might do something reckless. That person was now selfish. I ended the call without another word, afraid that if I spoke, everything inside me would spill out. The next morning, I got a text from my cousin Melissa. "Riley, I was shocked when I heard, "Savannah is your sister. How could you be so heartless? She's hurting." I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I couldn't comprehend how the story had twisted this far. Not long after, Aunt Judith Mom's younger sister called. I hesitated, then answered. She was usually the most fair-minded in the family, or so I thought. But her first words tightened my chest. Savannah cried her eyes out in front of Bod. Everyone. She said you cut her out of your life like she was a burden. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath. Auntie, I didn't cut her out. I just refused to sign an illegal loan. But she's your sister. Everyone has weak moments. Why couldn't you give in just a little? I'd heard those words for 15 years. Give in a little. Show some sympathy. Take care of her a little. Everything always came down to me giving a little, but no one ever asked how many littles I had sacrificed to keep a family that never truly. I listened afloat. I didn't answer. I just hung up and switched off my phone. That day, I worked like a machine. The feeling of being exiled from my own blood weighed down every thought, like the collapse of a sky I once believed was solid. Savannah still hadn't called, but I began seeing her vague posts online. Some people are born to succeed, some just need love. Never thought the person I admired most would push me out of their life. The attached photo showed her on a park bench, eyes red. Dozens of comments flooded in relatives, old friends, even a high school teacher. Stay strong, sweetheart. If family treats you like this, what's sacred anymore? No one deserves to be abandoned like that. I was painted as the villain, a successful but cold-hearted woman, a sister who turned away at her sibling's weakest moment. I felt suffocated. Every night, I came home to my tidy apartment, to the plants I tended myself, to the old photos tucked away in drawers. I felt alone. And worse, I felt guilty for not being wrong. Then I remembered Grandma Evelyn. She was the only one who never demanded explanations for why I lived the way I did. She never told me to sacrifice for anyone, never called my strength cold. She simply sat with me in silence whenever I visited, waiting for me to speak, and when I didn't, she just held my hand and smiled. She passed away too. Years ago. I hadn't spent enough time with her in her final months, caught up in work and nameless responsibilities. But when she died, I dropped everything to attend the funeral, even though Mom said, "You're probably too busy, no need to come." That night, I opened an old drawer and found a small envelope addressed to me. The handwriting shaky but clear. "Dear Riley, only open when you feel no one is on your side." I had forgotten about that letter. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten note and a small brass key. "My dear, if you're reading this, you may be hurting. You may be questioning whether you're wrong for living by your values. The answer is no, you are not wrong. Some people are born to hold a family together with love, and some are meant to keep a family from falling apart with reason. Neither are villains, but only a few are strong enough to hold the boundaries." At the bottom, one last line. "Go to Riverside Bank. Ask for Mr. Harold Peterson. Say it's from Evelyn Lancaster. Everything is prepared." I sat frozen for minutes. The next morning, I went to the Riverside Bank branch, just as she instructed. I hadn't made an appointment, but when I mentioned Evelyn's name, the receptionist immediately ushered me into a private office. Mr. Harold Peterson, a neatly dressed older man with silver hair, shook my hand warmly. "Miss Riley, I've been expecting you." He opened a small safe behind him and pulled out a sealed folder. "Your grandmother established a trust called the E.L. Growth Fund. There are specific conditions. The potential beneficiary is Savannah Thompson, but—" He paused, locking eyes with me. "But only if Savannah proves financial independence for 3 years, without receiving any money or support from the family, especially from you." If she fails, the entire trust transfers to you, for any purpose you choose as long as it relates to education or community development. I went numb. How much? I asked, my voice tight. $350,000, he answered. I leaned back in the chair, staring at nothing. My grandmother hadn't just left money. She had left me a choice, a chance to prove that refusing to sacrifice endlessly wasn't meaningless. More importantly, she believed in me. She believed that boundaries weren't cruelty, that sometimes the one who dares to say no is the one who saves an entire generation from cycles of dependence and avoidance. I left Riverside Bank in turmoil. The document in my hands wasn't just a legal paper, it was my grandmother's final testimony, proof that the loneliness, the pressure, the misunderstanding I had carried all these years weren't illusions. And now, even after her passing, she had chosen to stand by me in the clearest way possible, through the law. But I also understood something else. With the condition Grandma Evelyn set, I couldn't remain silent. I couldn't just reject the loan and walk away as if nothing happened. If I truly wanted to end the cycle of dependence and manipulation that had gripped my family for decades, I had to face the truth no matter how painful. That night, I went back to the office, sitting alone under the soft yellow glow of my desk lamp. On the screen was the loan file Savannah had submitted, bearing the forged version of my signature. I opened another file, logging into the firm's internal system, and sent a secure message to the only person I could trust at that moment. David Marks, the legal officer who handled personal financial fraud cases. David had been my colleague for nearly 8 years. He was the kind of person whose meticulousness bordered on irritating, but it was precisely that caution that always reassured me whenever complex legal issues arose. I didn't write a long explanation. Just one line. David, I need you to run a full check on all credit records under my name for the past 5 years. Highest priority. There may be fraud involved. Less than 30 minutes later, David called back. Riley, what have you gotten yourself into? I just finished reviewing your credit summary. There are several irregularities. I froze, clutching the phone as he read on. There are 2 credit cards issued under the name Riley M. Thompson, but the contact address is an apartment in Wicker Park, not your address. The first account was opened 3 years ago with a $15,000 limit, now carrying a $12,300 balance. The second was opened earlier this year and already has $8,100 in debt. I stiffened. Which banks? Lincoln Union and Goldridge Capital. I cross-checked the applications. Both files included copies of your ID and pay stubs. But here's the strange part. Each file has a third-party identity verification. The verifier's name is Linda M. Thompson. The air around me thickened instantly. David continued. Riley, if I'm not mistaken, that's your mother? My voice came out hoarse. Yes. Did you authorize her to conduct financial transactions on your behalf? Absolutely not. David lowered his voice. Then Riley, you may be the victim of organized credit fraud. If your family member verified your identity without authorization to open accounts, that's a serious violation. I didn't say anything more, only asked him to send all the documents to my private email. After the call ended, I sat motionless in front of the screen for a long time. The streetlights blurred beyond the glass. What I felt wasn't just shock anymore, it was devastation. I opened the reports David sent. Scans of the applications, ID copies, spending categories. Most transactions were luxury purchases, designer handbags, high-end shoes, online travel bookings, spa sessions, boutique gym memberships. The shipping address? The rental apartment in Wicker Park where Savannah had lived for nearly 2 years. Then I noticed another detail, a luxury car lease agreement, also under my name, also verified by Linda. The car was being used for private chauffeur bookings at personal events. I used to think my mother's indulgence of Savannah stopped at excuses and a few $1,000s here and there when she was broke. But now I realize Mom hadn't just enabled her. She had actively participated. She was the one paving the way for my sister to exploit my identity. I don't remember how long I cried. Only that when I finally wiped my face and walked into the firm's restroom to splash water on myself, I was no longer the Riley from that morning. I wasn't the sister expected to be forgiving or resilient. I was the victim of a long-running scheme orchestrated by my own blood. I called my private attorney, Frances Caldwell, an older, sharp woman who had once been a judge. I told her everything. Frances listened silently, never interrupting. When I finished, she spoke gently. "Riley, I've presided over many cases of financial fraud within families, more common than you'd imagine. Mothers, husbands, daughters who seem devoted, quietly stacking debt under someone else's name. The reasons vary: love, hope, even fear. But no matter the motive, the act is still a crime." I let out a long breath. "So should I call the police?" Frances hesitated, then replied, "You can, but first protect yourself. Freeze all your credit files, send alerts to every bank, revoke old authorizations, and most importantly, secure every piece of evidence. Once that's done, we'll talk about confrontation." I nodded, feeling like I had just stepped through a door I could never close again. That night, I drafted an email, not to Savannah, not to Mom, but to my law firm, a full report on the financial impersonation involving my family, to ensure transparency in case of legal risk later. I'd handled too many financial litigation cases to know. Silence always leaves the victim carrying the blame. I spent the entire night freezing my credit with the three major bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. I shut down old bank accounts and opened new ones, changed passwords across every service from banking to my apartment lease. I called the car company, terminating the fraudulent lease tied to my name. Each click, each form submitted, felt like cutting away a piece of my past with my mother and sister. But I couldn't afford sentiment anymore, not after what they had done. At 2:45 a.m., I received an email from David. "Riley, I hate to say this, but one of the compromised sub-accounts was used to apply for a secondary mortgage with a small financial institution in Indiana. I'm still digging, but it looks like they're scaling up their use of your identity. Immediate action is needed." I stared at the screen, chest tightening. Savannah hadn't stopped at a few credit cards. She had gone further, and my mother, Linda, had walked beside her. I never imagined I'd be gathering evidence against my own mother and sister. But the truth doesn't need imagination. It was right there in front of me. And if I didn't face it, I wouldn't just lose my assets, I'd lose myself. Aunt Judith's 70th birthday was being held at a riverside estate north of the city, the one time each year the entire family gathered. Even in the middle of the storm, I chose to go, not to save face, but because I had chosen silence no longer. The main hall was filled with candlelight and the smell of almond cake. Relatives laughed, posed for photos against a backdrop printed with Judith's name and birth year, while kids ran around with napkins tied on their heads, playing superheroes. I entered in a dark dress, my hair in a neat bun, wearing little makeup. Some glanced at me and nodded, others avoided eye contact. I wasn't surprised. Savannah stood by the gift table, radiant in a deep blue dress. Mom sat nearby, chatting with a few cousins, her smile broad but her eyes betraying tension when they flicked toward me. "Oh, Riley's here," a voice chimed behind me, Melissa, the cousin who had scolded me weeks earlier. She stepped forward, pointedly adding, "I thought you were too busy to show up. Savannah's been so upset lately because of—" I didn't answer, just smiled politely and moved toward the drinks table. I needed to observe and wait for the right moment. An hour into the party, the MC began inviting family members to speak in honor of Judith. I quietly set my glass down, walked into the center of the room, and felt dozens of startled eyes follow me. I heard whispers of my name, some hesitant, some derisive. I stood before the microphone, my voice steady and low. I won't spend long praising Aunt Judith, she's heard plenty of beautiful words already. I came here today not only for her birthday, I came because I need to be heard fairly. The room grew unusually still. I brought some documents. I pulled a folder from my bag and held it up. These are legal records of a series of credit frauds committed over the past 3 years, under my name, Riley Thompson. These debts were not mine. They were created using my personal information, including my ID, my financial records, and forged signatures. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I locked eyes with Mom and Savannah, unflinching. My investigation shows that the transactions were carried out by Savannah, and Linda Thompson, my mother, verified the identity documents, though I never authorized her. Riley, Mom shot to her feet, her voice trembling with fury. What are you saying? Are you turning this party into a stage to humiliate your mother and sister? I'm not humiliating anyone, I replied evenly. I'm protecting myself. And I repeat, this is fact, not emotion. Savannah stormed forward, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. You've lost your mind. You made this up. Why? Because you can't stand me getting more attention? I met her eyes not with anger, but with weary resignation. I don't envy the attention. I'm exhausted from being exploited. The room seemed to hold its breath. At the back of the hall, a man in a navy suit stood. Adam Jensen, my friend and a senior officer at Lincoln Union Bank. I also brought a witness. I gestured for Adam to join me. He took the microphone, his voice calm and professional. I personally handled the credit accounts under Riley Thompson's name. Upon verification, we found signatures inconsistent with prior records held by the bank. Some applications also showed irregularities in the identity verification process. These are grounds to suspect fraudulent activity. My mother's face drained of color. Savannah stood frozen, fists clenched at her sides. I continued, my voice soft but carrying clearly. I've reported everything to my private attorney. I haven't filed charges yet. But all the evidence has been turned over to the legal department. I don't want my family on trial, but I will not stay silent while being dragged down by mistakes that aren't mine. Savannah screamed, "You're killing me!" I turned to her, meeting her gaze without flinching. No, you've been doing that to yourself for a long time. I don't remember exactly how I left the microphone, only that no one stopped me as I walked out of the hall. No one called me back. There were no laughs, no polite goodbyes. Only silence, heavy, undeniable silence, as if everyone was finally forced to face what they had been avoiding for years. The atmosphere I left behind was no longer a family party, but a quake strong enough to shift everyone's place in that web of relationships. And I was no longer the silent bearer of burdens. I was the one who stepped into the light and forced everyone to face the truth. I left Aunt Judith's birthday party in suffocating silence. Driving home, every word, every look, every stunned expression of my relatives replayed in my head like a slow-motion film. No one defended me, but no one could deny the truth anymore. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. My desk was still neat, files stacked in order, a steaming cup of coffee waiting, but inside me, something had shifted forever. I met with Francis Caldwell right after to discuss the next steps. We agreed not to pursue criminal charges immediately, but instead to file a petition in civil court to block all credit transactions under my name. This was the first step to shield me from being held liable if Savannah kept spending or tried to withdraw money from temporarily approved loans. Frances, her hand never leaving her leather-bound notebook, told me, "We need to close every leak, every gap. Not just to protect your assets, but to send a clear message. Riley Thompson is no longer a name that can be exploited." I nodded. more resolute than ever. At the same time, I submitted an internal request to the Financial Investigations Unit at my law firm, a benefit reserved for senior staff. I asked them to conduct a thorough audit of all financial activity tied to my name but not initiated by me. It took only 2 days for the preliminary report to land on my desk. And like a crushing blow, it revealed a picture I had never dared to imagine. Savannah had used the loan from Lincoln Union to sign a string of event service contracts in California. She had leased an office in Venice Beach, paid deposits for the first 3 months. The contracts were signed. She had also ordered luxury decor and planned a grand opening styled like a lavish party. On social media, she had already sent invitations to a launch party for Savannah Bloom Studio where inspiration is reborn. The brand name sounded like a glossy fashion magazine. But the money behind it came from my identity, from the reputation and legal safety I would lose if I did nothing. I sat frozen after reading the report. My sister wasn't just leeching off me to get by. She was building an entire new life on fraud, wrapped in shiny layers of pretense. And what chilled me most was this. Savannah knew exactly what she was doing. I opened my safe and pulled out the trust documents Grandma Evelyn had left. I reread the conditions slowly, line by line, as though signing a contract with my past self. The fund shall only be released if Savannah Thompson, within 3 years of Evelyn Lancaster's passing, proves financial independence, carries no credit debt, and receives no material support from Riley Thompson or from any resource under Riley Thompson's name. I carried the file into the conference room where Francis was waiting. On the table lay a meticulously prepared objection to Savannah's beneficiary rights. "You want to submit this?" Francis asked, her calm eyes firm. I nodded. I can't let her collect $350,000 while building a fake empire off my name. We'll send copies to Riverside Bank and the trust's legal custodians. Once the dispute is filed, the fund will be frozen until the court verifies Savannah's financial status. I looked at Frances and spoke deliberately. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for my grandmother. And for Savannah, too. She needs to learn that actions have consequences. I can't keep carrying adulthood on her behalf. Frances smiled faintly. You're doing the right thing. When I left the meeting room, my mind felt strangely blank. Not relief, but a cold acceptance that I had crossed a line of no return. From this moment, I was no longer the quiet supporter. I was the direct opponent. I drafted an email, attached the court's notice, and sent it to Savannah. Subject line: Notice of Trust Beneficiary. Dispute. The message read, Savannah, I have filed a request to freeze the trust distribution until there is full legal verification of your financial status. I know you are preparing to start a company with money from the loan under my name. All evidence has been submitted to legal authorities. If you believe the truth will vanish just because you label it entrepreneurship, you are mistaken. I hope you will soon learn to stand on your own, but not with someone else's reputation and identity. No accusations, no heavy-handed words. I hit send, then leaned back in my chair and took a long breath. The next day, I received Savannah's first message in weeks. Just one line, "You're cruel." I didn't respond. Sometimes silence is the clearest answer. And the firmest boundary. I wasn't surprised my mother and sister couldn't accept reality. What I didn't expect was how viciously they reacted. Linda, the woman who used to hold me during thunderstorms, now sent bitter messages, calling me the family destroyer, the daughter obsessed with money and power. Savannah, the sister who once begged me to write her 10th grade presentation, now called me a traitor to my own blood. They wouldn't admit they were wrong. No remorse. No pause. Instead, they launched a smear war. A week after the party, I got a message from an aunt. Riley, did you really do those things to your sister? The whole family is talking. I don't want to believe it, but Linda's been saying some Hard things. My stomach dropped. This aunt had always trusted my mother's word. If even she was doubting me, then I knew Linda and Savannah had spread lies. Within 3 days, the rumors had spread through the church community where my family had always been active. I rarely attended, but Linda never missed, and she used that to paint me as a cold-blooded sister who exploited her sibling for wealth and then abandoned her. When she stumbled, even an old acquaintance from the Women's Fellowship called me, "Riley, I heard you made Savannah sign some kind of slave contract. Is that true? They're saying you forced her to work 12 hours a day without pay." I couldn't even laugh. None of it was true. Savannah had never worked for me. She couldn't even handle waking up early for a group project. I set the phone down. Lies, whispered and passed along, traveled faster than truth. And Linda knew exactly how to strike at emotions, at sympathy, at the image of the sacrificial mother versus the arrogant daughter. I could endure hatred. But what I couldn't accept was when my mother sent an anonymous letter to my firm Whitaker and Rhodes addressed in bold caps. Attorney Riley Davenport exploits and defrauds her sister for financial gain. In the letter, Linda accused me of forcing Savannah to sign the loan papers, then refusing to repay after using the money for personal investments. She even attached cropped screenshots of bank records, ones I had never seen clearly fabricated to smear me. When the HR director called me in, I calmly brought my entire legal file, emails, and certified proof of forged signatures from partner banks. I laid everything out from Savannah's first text to the internal investigation my firm's legal team conducted. I proved not a cent of the loan ever reached me, or any account tied to me. When I finished, Jennifer, the HR director, set her pen down and looked me straight in the eye. "Riley, we do not doubt your integrity or your competence. What your mother did is highly inappropriate, but we'll handle this internally. Do you need us to provide legal support?" I didn't answer immediately. That question felt like an umbrella offered in a hailstorm. I felt trusted. I shook my head lightly. "Not yet, but I deeply appreciate that the firm stands with the truth." I returned to my office with mixed feelings. Relief that the firm didn't believe the lies. Bitterness that my own mother had tried to ruin the reputation I had built with sweat and sacrifice. It didn't stop there. The following week, Savannah live-streamed on Instagram to her tens of thousands of followers, crying, clutching her cat, claiming she was disowned by her own sister for not making enough money. Between sobs, she said, "She's rich, she has everything, and all I want is freedom. I never hurt anyone. But Riley only cares about money." The comments flooded with pity, support for Savannah, and curses at me, the cold, successful sister. I didn't reply. I didn't post. I refused to fight this battle on social media, because truth, if strong enough, doesn't need shouting. Still, I quietly downloaded the live stream, archived the defamatory messages, and handed them to my lawyer just in case. Because I could see clearly now, Savannah wasn't just selfish. She was willing to manipulate public sympathy with tears and lies. And Linda, my mother, stood proudly beside her, even if it meant trampling her eldest daughter. One day, when I stopped by the old house to retrieve some trust documents, I found the door ajar. I stepped inside and saw my mother at the kitchen table with messy stacks of papers. Savannah sat beside her, typing furiously on a laptop. I stood silently for a few seconds, then spoke in a steady voice. "What now? You've sent letters, live-streamed, spread rumors. What are you doing here, drafting another complaint?" Savannah jumped up, face red. "What right do you have to come in here and mock us? This is still Mom's house." I looked at my mother. She didn't meet my eyes. She only muttered, weary, You should have stayed quiet. Don't make such a spectacle about the loan. Outsiders don't understand. They'll just think you're cold." I exhaled sharply. No, Mom, I'm not. Making a spectacle. You and Savannah are the ones burning my name with lies. If people think I'm cold because I protect my finances and dignity, then maybe I never belonged to this family at all. I turned and walked out, leaving behind two women, one who had given me life, one who had once leaned on me, neither of whom had a place left in my heart. But I didn't shed tears, because I had learned that sometimes the only thing worth holding on to is self-respect. Under the cold lights of the courthouse ceiling, I stood tall, spine straight as if preparing for the biggest trial of my career. But today, I wasn't representing a client or defending a corporation. I was there for myself. For my honor, for my stolen identity, for the name Riley Bennett that had been twisted into a tool for greed and deceit by the very people who once called themselves my family. My attorney, Jennifer Klein, a senior partner at the firm where I had worked nearly a decade, stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Your Honor, we present evidence that my client, Miss Riley Bennett, has been the victim of sophisticated financial fraud orchestrated by her own sister, Savannah Bennett, with the collusion of their mother, Mrs. Linda Thompson. The courtroom fell silent. On the big screen, documents appeared one by one. Forged loan contracts, unauthorized credit card statements under my name, emails between Savannah and a finance company outlining her plan to funnel the loan into a personal venture, a so-called creative arts startup in California she flaunted on Instagram. I didn't take my eyes off Savannah. She sat slumped, blonde hair falling across her face, fists gripping her skirt. Linda sat upright, chin raised, eyes scanning the room as if waiting for someone to rise in her defense. But no one did. The signature on the $150,000 loan was examined and deemed forged, Jennifer continued. We have reports from a handwriting expert, confirmation from the bank about a suspicious email address used to open the accounts, all of it pointing directly to Savannah Bennett. The judge, an older woman with a stern face, flipped through the documents, her silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the light as her gaze landed on me. Miss Bennett, she said, do you have anything you wish to say? I rose, fingers clenched, and drew a deep breath. I am Riley Bennett, 33 years old, a financial attorney. I've worked non-stop for 10 years to build my career, pay off student loans, buy a small apartment in Chicago, and live responsibly. But nothing could have prepared me for the shock of discovering that my own sister and my mother exploited my trust to commit financial fraud. And they did it, without a shred of hesitation. I turned to Savannah and spoke slowly. Savannah, you have the right to choose your life, but you don't have the right to make me the pavement for your fantasy. And Mom, you didn't just stand by, you enabled it. For years, I tried to understand why you favored her, why you abandoned me when I needed you most. Now I understand. In your eyes, I was nothing but an ATM, and Savannah was the unfinished dream you wanted to live through. The room thickened, tense as a drawn bowstring. A few whispers rose from the gallery. Then, suddenly, the courtroom doors swung open. A man entered, gray hair, long gray coat, a worn but sharp face. My heart pounded. Daniel Bennett, my father, whom I hadn't seen in nearly 8 years. His footsteps echoed as he walked forward. Your Honor, he said in a deep, resonant voice. I am the father of Riley and Savannah. I am late, but I asked to speak for justice. And for my children. The judge nodded, granting permission. I left when they were young. I was wrong. But today, I cannot stay silent while Linda, the woman who was once my wife, destroys both of them with blind, toxic indulgence. Savannah grew up never learning responsibility because her mother fixed every mess, and Riley, she had to learn to defend herself by the time she was 10. I wasn't there to protect her, but today I stand here, not to redeem myself, but to tell the truth. Riley is the only one who has preserved integrity, dignity, and self-respect in the wreckage our family created. Linda clutched the armrest, face flushed red. She shouted, "You have no right to speak. You abandoned us." Daniel turned, looking directly at her. "No, Linda, you abandoned Riley. You turned her into a stranger in her own home." The air nearly cracked apart. Savannah shot to her feet. "Everyone only sees her success, but she never helps me. I just wanted a chance like hers." I didn't respond. I just looked at her, eyes long since emptied of tears. The judge raised her hand for silence, then spoke slowly. "The Civil Court of Illinois rules. Riley Bennett bears no legal responsibility for any loan or credit account opened under her name. All such transactions are deemed fraudulent and will be referred to investigators. Savannah Bennett is liable for the full repayment of the loan, with interest and penalties. The matter will be forwarded to the state's attorney's office for possible criminal charges." I closed my eyes, not in triumph, but in the strange lightness of a weight I had carried for months finally being lifted. Behind me, Daniel placed a hand gently on my shoulder. His voice broke as he whispered, "I'm proud of you, Riley. And I'm sorry for leaving you alone so long." I turned, offering a small smile. I said nothing, because some wounds cannot be mended with words, yet some truths once acknowledged are enough to begin healing. That afternoon, I left the courthouse with empty hands, but a heart astonishingly light. Not because I won, though that was true, but because through this battle, I had reclaimed myself, a woman, long branded as the eldest who must sacrifice, forced into the role of the good daughter who isn't allowed anger, someone who stayed silent to keep the illusion of a family already rotted from within. The trial had ended, but the aftermath was only beginning. Savannah, ordered to repay the fraudulent loan plus damages to me, had no way out. The credit cards under my name were canceled, but the rest, the accounts under hers, she had to face alone. She sat slumped in court, and though the spotlight that day was not hers, I felt no satisfaction. There was only a quiet grief, watching the little sister I once carried in my arms now stand as a symbol of deceit and dependence. But in that moment, I understood. No one can save someone who refuses to save themselves, and I could no longer be the lifeline dragged under by their grip. The following week, Savannah moved out of her small apartment in Decatur, the one I had paid the deposit for 3 years earlier. I don't know where she went, only heard she found a receptionist job at a small ad agency in Alpharetta. For the first time, Savannah had to live on her own paycheck. And maybe that not the trial, not the exposure, was the true shock. Linda, my mother, said nothing after being called out by Daniel in court. That moment was like an explosion, shaking our relatives awake. Those who once listened to her tales of the ungrateful daughter and the selfish eldest now kept their distance. The tea circles, the neighborhood whispers, all went silent. At church, one paternal aunt told me directly, "You did the right thing. Any mother who uses the word love to wound her child deserves to be held accountable." I didn't answer. I only bowed my head. Some pains run so deep, even praise cannot lighten them. A few weeks later, I received an offer from the New York branch office, the place I had once dreamed of working but declined because Mom needed me near. Savannah. They offered me the deputy director role in legal development. Not an opportunity I chased, but one that arrived when I was finally ready. I packed my Atlanta apartment, once a base for countless visits from Mom and Savannah to borrow money, a car, or trust. I sold off furniture, kept only a few books, and Grandma Evelyn's framed photo. Then I left. New York greeted me with the crisp air of early fall, with its chaotic but promising rhythm. I settled into a small studio in Brooklyn, commuted by subway, brewed my own coffee each morning, no calls from Mom asking for favors, no texts about Savannah needing more tuition money. Then I reopened Grandma Evelyn's old box, where the original trust documents rested. For the first time, I read carefully every clause, every line she had written in her slanted black ink. If Riley feels it is right, let her use this money to help women financially abused by their families, just as she once was, without realizing it. I cried, not from pain, but from recognition. In my grandmother's eyes, I wasn't the stubborn daughter, but someone capable of healing not just myself, but others. I hired a team of young lawyers, partnered with a nonprofit in Queens, and formally launched the Evelyn Trust Project, providing free legal aid to women exploited financially by family, forged loan signatures, forced credit cards, endless coerced support. We did more than draft petitions. We ran workshops on spotting financial manipulation, classes on basic money management, and a podcast sharing the untold stories like mine. No one in my family ever publicly addressed it. Savannah stayed silent. Linda, too. But a few months later, I received a handwritten letter from my father, Daniel. Riley, I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me, years ago. But today, seeing you stand tall, I am proud. You didn't just save yourself, you preserved your grandmother's legacy. I folded the Strective Sosavazu letter and placed it in a frame beside Grandma Evelyn's photo. Some love doesn't come as embraces, roses, or sweet words. Some love is in the courage to say no, to stop what's wrong, to refuse demands disguised as kinship. I once thought love meant yielding. But now I know, true love isn't blind indulgence, it is setting boundaries, even with the ones who raised you. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give your family is to stop, to let them learn how to live without hurting others, and to let yourself live without asking permission. What would you do if one day the people you loved most were the very ones who forced you to learn self-protection? If you've ever felt used, cast aside by your own family, know this: you are not alone. I lived it for years, until I understood that love does not mean unconditional sacrifice. I truly want to know, have you ever had to draw boundaries with family? Have you ever stood at the crossroads of pleasing them or protecting yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll read every word, because your story might give someone else the courage to begin again. And if my story touched something deep in you about family, about limits crossed too many times, I hope you'll follow this channel, because this journey doesn't end here. I'll keep sharing the most honest stories about family, about lessons paid in tears, and about hopeful new endings. Because sometimes, what we need isn't a perfect family, but a space where our voice is heard and respected. And maybe, right here through these stories is where you'll find yourself again.